Hey, what is up, everybody? I'm Jorge, and welcome to Shoot the Gap, our IDP fantasy football show here on the Fantasy and Frames podcast. Tonight, we're going to start our deep dive into the 2023 NFL Rookie Draft class with our edge rusher position. So stay tuned as we break down some of these exciting prospects, and we're going to let you know basically how they can potentially be relevant for your IDP fantasy football rosters going forward. It feels so good to have Gator J behind the glass this time. There's like no hitting the wrong button to start the show. There's no stumbling and talking about snafus incorrectly. Like, it's really great having Gator back. So welcome back, Gator, behind the glass. Before we get started with tonight's show, just want to remind everybody to head over to our YouTube page. If you like what you hear, like, subscribe to our content. We got draft profiles. We got rookie prospect profiles. We're going to start including some IDP profiles in those Dynasty target profile videos, as well as our rookie prospects. Head over to fantasyandframes.com. Check out all of our article work that we're putting there. All new article format. You got some written stuff. You got some pictures. You got some video stuff, all into one pot over at fantasyandframes.com, as well as check out all of our Dynasty IDP rankings, as well as our draft IDP rankings coming out very, very, very soon. And with that, let's get right into it. We're starting a new segment this week. Hollywood and Monty and I, and Austin and I. That's
so good.
We call it Inside the Frames question of the day. So since he came up with the idea, Hollywood, let's let Austin introduce this segment. Go for it, Austin.
Yeah, so we thought of this, and we thought it would be a better way for us to kind of give you our deep dive thought processes into some of these deeper questions that you might have about our takes that we have. This week's question is, what are some things that you're looking at in these edge rushers, defensive line prospects that make them stick out to you? Are you taking a lot of their production stats and weighing that in with their conference play? Are you heavily favoring their combine results? Or are you heavily weighing in the skills you see on the film? Let's start with your thoughts there, Hollywood. Do we have him?
Yeah, for me, it's a combination of things. Nope, I knew I was on delay. Sorry. So it's a combo of things, really. But for me, it starts with the game film, right? What I see on tape, what I'm seeing each and every week. So whose game do I see? And then I look at that and say, okay, whose game do I see translating to the next level, right? And then I like to go back. Yep. What was that? Who was that production against, right? Whose production was that against? Was it SEC level, or are we talking about Division II or whatever? And then as for the combine and pro days, they don't really move the needle for me a lot. I mean, they're fun to watch and all that, but really they're just kind of going back and verifying what I've seen on film and in the games and stuff like that, right? So.
Gotcha.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense there. Austin, what about you, man?
Yeah, for me, I think I focus more on the production stats, and then I put a lot of weight into the conference play. I don't want, all these guys that are putting up big stats in these non-Power 5 conferences because they're not playing the, future NFL stars in our league. So I put a lot of weight into those Power 5 conferences and those production stats. And then sometimes I will fall in love with these overall just athletic freaks. Like the Anthony Richardsons of this draft class, Nolan Smith that we'll talk about a little bit later. Those guys that are just athletic freaks. I love those guys. You never know what's going to happen when they step on the field. As for film, I'm personally not great at watching film. I don't know what the things to look at just yet, so I'm still working on that. So I rely more on the scouting reports on these guys of the people that I trust a little bit more, just to see if, see what they're seeing, and then I use their knowledge and try it. What about you there, Jorge?
So I like to, Hollywood starts with film and then supports it with numbers. I kind of do the other way around. I like to research everything. I kind of get into that, YouTube hole of just like going into information, absorbing as much as I can. And so I do agree with you all in terms of like looking at level of competition. That is an important one. But there are certain things and certain stats by certain players, depending on wherever they're playing, that you just can't really ignore. I mean, if everybody in the NFL draft came from a Power 5 school, well, then that would make the NFL draft kind of boring. But you hear about these upside plays that come from smaller schools, come from the MAC, and come from other places that have success. That being the case, you want to limit your pool of players. You want to look for the big fish in the small pond here, or vice versa, I should say. So I like to look at productivity metrics. I love looking at scouting reports. I could sit there and read articles and articles and articles all day regarding scouting reports for players. I want to get the ins and outs. I want to know what exactly makes these players tick. I want to look at consistency in production, like having one really good year could be an anomaly, and more often than not, that tends to be the case. So I really want to see that you're seeing a lot of production from year to year, or if there's a down year, like what was the cause of that? Where did things go wrong compared to previous seasons? I like to look at versatility. I want to see that all whether it's edge rushers or defensive linemen like we're talking about today, or linebackers or defensive backs. I want to see some versatility. What else can they do besides just doing one thing? But if they do just one thing, how well do they do it? So there's a multitude of things right there, Austin.
That's interesting. I've always been curious that you said you play it different than I do, film to numbers, right? And you're going from numbers to film. I can't wrap my head around it really. I'm like, because if you're watching film, you already who's good, right? And you're just using the numbers to verify.
Well, here's the thing. Like for me, it's easier for me to sort down a list of players, right? And then be like, okay, this person looks good. Let's see how they look like on film versus like, YouTubing, for example, or, using a film room, for example, of going down list by list by list. I kind of like want to sort my information first and then go into looking in the details for it. Last night on Dynasty 365, we were talking about, wide receiver prospects, and we're looking at like, well, this wide receiver blew away the combine, but their productivity was god awful in college. What's the disconnect? Is there a disconnect? Is this person just a really good athlete, but just not a good wide receiver? Were they not used properly? Same thing applies to IDP. It really is, numbers do play a huge role, but I do agree. Film and scouting reports, I mean, basically absorb as much information as you can. But for me, I like to go starting with numbers first and then kind of take it from there. Because film, like numbers don't lie, film doesn't lie, but access to film is difficult, right? It's very hard unless you're like sitting there watching the entire game, or you're lucky enough to get all 22 footage for each game and watch, every single play a player has. That's difficult to find. You're limited by your resources, so you really have to like pick and choose like how you go about getting this information properly, in my opinion.
That's true.
But anyhow, before we get into more talk about defensive linemen, just a reminder, folks, when we talk about edge rushers and interior defensive linemen, these are all going to be clumped under defensive linemen as a category, because a lot of fantasy platforms out there, they only have 3 position designations: defensive lineman, linebacker, defensive back. You have certain sites like MFL or ESPN that you can actually break it down into 5 position designations. But for our purposes, we're going to keep it DL, LB, defensive back. And then if we need to expand on that, obviously there are exceptions to every rule. We will go ahead and do that and let you know. But let's just get into it. Let's just start talking some rookies right now. Austin, let's start with you. Who is a player that people should know at the defensive line / edge rusher position heading into the NFL draft this year?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. If you don't know about Will Anderson yet, you need to. He's going to be probably one of the first pass rushers off the draft board in the NFL, and he's possibly the first defensive player taken. It just depends on how it falls here. We'll start with his measurables at the combine. He came in at 6'3.5" and 253 pounds. He only took part in 3 of the events. The 10-yard split, he finished 7th among the edge rushers, and he finished 12th in the 40-yard dash there among the edge rushers. Those aren't like great numbers, but they're not numbers that you're gonna really start to worry about a player either. And he must have felt pretty good about those numbers because he skipped his pro day today. He didn't decline the workouts. He talked to the reporters, and that was about it. Moving on to more of his production stats, he entered as a true freshman 3 years ago now, and he dominated ever since he stepped on the field. He racked up 34.5 sacks, 204 total tackles, and 58.5 tackles for loss across those 3 years. And his sophomore season was probably one of the most impressive seasons we've seen in recent history, where he ended up finishing 5th in Heisman voting as a defensive player. He had 101 total tackles, 31 being for a loss, and a massive 17.5 sacks that season. The last 2 seasons, he has won SEC Defensive Player of the Year. So the numbers are there. All the scouts are raving about him. He's the number 1 edge rush prospect for me. So he will be my first IDP taken off of fantasy as well.
Wow, that's very interesting. Before we get into talking about that a little bit further, for those of you who are asking questions, I want to get some answers in the comments. We can't see your comments on Twitter, so head over to our YouTube channel and drop those questions or comments into the chat, and we'll be happy to answer all of those, as well as check us out on our Facebook page at Fantasy and Frames. So Hollywood, what's interesting here is Austin just talked about, his first IDP this year in terms of rookie drafts. And I think you could agree scoring setting plays a huge role in what we're talking about when we're talking about like where we're assigning value for a player, so to speak. Unless this player is like all worldly and you just should not pass up on an opportunity. Fortunately, here at Fantasy and Frames, for those of you who did not listen to our first episode of the season, we talked about how we like to use a balanced scoring system, our Fantasy and Frame scoring system, where you have that comparability amongst all the defensive positions for IDP, as well as their comparability to offensive players. If you haven't, go back and listen or watch our episode from last Tuesday. It's called Your IDP Primer. Anyhow, so having a balanced scoring system, does that make it easier for you, Hollywood, to go edge rusher or defensive lineman with the first pick in your draft if they're really dominant, just because of like the steep downfall you get at the position in fantasy?
Yeah, I mean, it does a little bit, but I think your league's position verification is just as important, if not more important, right? Because if you're playing in general leagues where you start linebacker, defensive back, defensive lineman, there's not as much as a drop off if you're in a position specific league where you have to start defense ends, defensive tackles, or corners. So in those type of leagues, I think, right, because you can probably play him at defensive end with the way it's set up or where he's going to get drafted. But in general leagues, I think it takes a little bit, because how many times have we said it? Linebackers, then safeties are usually your cash cows for IDP, right? That's where all your points is at. So I think his value really goes towards position specifically. But man, he's so good that he's going to have value everywhere, right?
No, totally. That totally makes sense. Let me jump into my player I want to talk about next, or the next player we're going to be talking about. That's Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech, edge rusher, played exclusively at left outside linebacker in college. I love 3-4 defenses. I love the left. I love the outside linebackers, just because for me, as a fantasy player, I like to see the versatility, both rushing as well as perhaps assisting in the run game. I call it the Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney effect when we're talking about edge rushers. You have Myles Garrett for the Cleveland Browns, who is a excellent pass rusher, and you had Jadeveon Clowney for the Browns in recent seasons, who was an excellent run defender. And they both had their skill sets, right? For IDP purposes, I like looking at when I'm looking at defensive linemen or / edge rushers who can do both, who can rush the passer, who play well against the run, help and run support. And that is exactly what Tyree Wilson did at Texas Tech. When we're talking about pressures on the quarterback, he was 5th in total pressures in 2023 among draft eligible edge rushers with a 19.5% pressure rate in the Power 5. He had a 22.3% win rate, which has him 4th among all draft eligible players, again in the Power 5. He was 6th in solo tackles with 52, 2nd in defensive stops against the run, had an 18% tackle rate versus the run. Normally you see that with your inside linebackers. To see that with an outside linebacker on top of your edge rusher productivity, that is remarkable. Just unbelievable. He has incredible range on the field. He runs down the ball carrier well. He's a good pass rusher, but it's one of those things where, according to various scouting reports, he is explosive off the gate, or out the gate rather, but it's almost like he's thinking too much about technique. Like, let me do this, let me do that, versus just instinctively going for it, going towards the quarterback. Stat wise, like in 2022, look, he had 61 total tackles, 7 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. So this guy can wreak havoc on the field. If I could summarize one of the big weaknesses he has, again, according to various scouting reports out there, like I said, I'd like to deep dive and do my research. A little too much in his head. He's a little too much in his head when he gets off the line. If he just would let those instincts take over that only come from repetition, it is something that I think he could have a lot of success. He's projected in various mock drafts to be a first-round player, if not a top 10 player at the position. Definitely somebody you should be paying attention to in your IDP rookie drafts. He is 23 years old, so he's still on the young side. And I'll get into age in a little bit. When we talk about offensive players, one of the knocks we give, again, I'm drawing comparisons between IDPs and offensive players here just so you can have a better understanding of how things go hand in hand. When we're looking at offensive players and we're looking at older age players, we start to think, are they really that good, or are they that good because they've been taking on and abusing younger players that don't have as much experience, and they're basically letting their age and their size kind of throw their quote unquote weight around and performance. The same thing could potentially be said for IDP. I need to dig into a little bit more research before I can make a statement there, but he's not really that much of an older player, 23 years old, coming out here, 6'6", 275, just a massive human being. He can wreak a lot of havoc. Does it both rushing and passer as well as helping and run support. So I'm really excited about that. Before we get into Hollywood's player next, let's hear from our friends over at TrophySmack.
What is up, everyone? It's your boy, Fantasy J77. I'm here to tell you about the best wall plaques in the game. That's right, Wall Smack by TrophySmack. From the epic fantasy wins to the pictures of your loved ones' special occasions. Use the code FRAMES10 at checkout for 10% off. It's that easy. Load your pictures on the TrophySmack.com. Pick your size. Don't forget to put FRAMES10 as your promo code at checkout. That's it. It's done. Enjoy the rest of the show, everyone.
All right, Hollywood, let's get into your first edge rusher that you're going to be talking about here tonight. Who you got for us? God love audio delays. They're fantastic.
Yeah, so for me, I took Lucas Van Ness, right? Lucas Van Ness, the edge from Iowa, defensive end, right? They typically run the 4-3. They produce some of the bigger defensive ends over the year. AJ Epineza, Anthony Nelson, those type guys. So he fits that same mold, right? So he was redshirted as a freshman, played 2 years with him, played in 27 games, but he never started a game. Well, he must suck if he's not playing, if he's not starting games. But if you follow Iowa, you know that they have these big monsters that just play 4 years, so it's hard to get your foot in the door. But he didn't disappoint, right? 71 tackles, 34 solos, 19 and a half TFLs, 13 and a half sacks. And despite not starting a game, he carved out a major role for him, right? As a pass rusher. Impressive feat for a young player. And if you don't play IDP or not a big college fan, you probably haven't heard of him, right? Well, you probably heard of him first time at the Combine, which he just measured off the charts, right? He's 6'5", 272, 34-inch arms, 11-inch hands, and he runs a 4.58 with a 1.64 10-yard split, 9.10 broad jump. I mean, 7.02 cut three cone. Everything he done was in the top level for his size and weight, right? He's going to be best suited for a 4-3 end because he has that versatility to play inside or outside, which is not a problem. And he was given the name Hercules by his teammates. And if you've ever seen him with a shirt off, he's chiseled, right? I mean, he looks like a Greek god or whatever. So his game starts with the pure power and raw power, right? Because that's what he's at. But he's got the burst, speed, and quickness to take him to another level when he gets polished. His power in his hips, lower body, he can anchor down, upper body to shack instead and get off to make the tackle. So, I mean, he can disengage just about as good as anybody in this class, really. And he's more polished as a pass rusher at his, being a redshirt sophomore than most seniors are. I mean, he's just that gifted and has that type of skill set. So, I mean, he can stick with some of the more mobile quarterbacks in the league. I mean, he has quickness, burst, and speed there. So, plays when I first picked up, I was like, man, this dude just don't take a play off, right? So, I think with all that, he's got some things he's got to work on, hands, footwork a little bit, right? Needs to be a little more fluid when he changes direction. But getting him in the NFL, I think with the good coaching, his ceiling is just, I don't know where it could be. He could be one of the best, league's best pass rushers. We've seen it too many times.
You're muted there, Jorge.
Having a little production issues here. Sorry, we got a little connectivity issues with Hollywood. He'll be back soon. No, that's very good information. We're going to be doing a rookie prospect profile on him, on Luke Van Ness, coming up soon. So you can pay attention for that over on our YouTube channel, as well as over on fantasyandframes.com. Let's go to our next player here, Austin. Who do you got for us?
Yeah, let's talk about Isaiah Foskey. I believe that's how you say his name. He's a 6'5", 264-pound redshirt junior, phenom out of Notre Dame. He finished in the top 10 at the Combine in the 40-yard dash, which he ran a 4.58, which was 9th best overall. He had his 3-cone drill was 7.28 seconds, which was finished as 6th best overall. And finally, his 20-yard shuttle was 4.41 seconds, which was 5th best. So he showed out in some of these quicker agility speed testing, which was good for him among the defensive linemen, I should say. He really broke out in his 3rd season here at Notre Dame. He was able to grab 10 sacks and 10.5 sacks in the last 2 seasons, respectively. Sorry. This was good enough for back-to-back seasons that finished top 10 across the FBS in sack numbers. And then he was also able to add a decent tackle numbers with an average of 48 over the last 2 seasons as well. And he was always behind the line of scrimmage, stopping the run. He grabbed an average of 11 tackles for loss the last 2 seasons as well. From scouting reports that I've seen, his most impressive skills were his footwork and his play recognition. He was always able to get behind the line, stop the run when needed, just be there on the tackle, on the run, and then also get to the quarterback and apply pressure. The biggest issue that I saw in the reports was his hand usage. They said he wasn't really violent with his hand usages. Most of the time, he wanted to like ghost technique, is what they said. So I think that's something that can be taught at the NFL level pretty easily. So I expect that to help to come with this, first couple of seasons, and that should help him in his pass rush and block shedding. So I think right now he's expected to be a mid to late first round NFL pick. So we'll see where he ends up. Hopefully he'll end up somewhere that he can learn some things and get after the quarterback a little bit more.
Very nice. Hollywood, welcome back. Going back to you for a second, talking about Lucas Van Ness. You mentioned taking off his shirt and having the body of a Greek god. It's almost like you want him to.
The players gonna play, and the haters gonna hate, baby. I'm just gonna shake it off.
Would that be an accurate assessment there, Hollywood? Nope. This is where the delay is coming in handy.
That would not be accurate.
I'm surprised you didn't break out and dance right there. I know that's your favorite song.
Yeah.
Look at Austin coming in, firing shots. This is the second week in a row.
I don't need this kind of stuff from you, Austin.
He
when
gets
you were
it
talking
enough
about
for
the
me,
Greek, when you were talking about the Greek god, I thought you were talking about yourself for a second, but then I remembered who you were talking about, Lucas Van Ness, and I was like, oh, okay, he does look like that.
See, he was complimenting you right there, Hollywood. I'm just saying. All right, whatever. All right. Moving on to Will McDonald, the fourth out of Iowa State. 6'3", 236, 24 years old. Okay, now I know we're getting into that older player talk that I was having a little bit earlier. What does that necessarily mean? I don't know, but just keep that in the back of your mind. Played right defensive end at Iowa State. 2022 was actually a down year for him in terms of productivity, only posting 5 sacks with a 9.6% pressure rate. However, back in 2021 and 2020, you saw him in pressure rates back-to-back 16.5 and 15.8. That is more him. That is the consistency that was happening in previous seasons. I don't know what the heck happened in 2022, but for me, when I see that statistical consistency and then there's like a dip in production, I kind of consider that more of a one-off than you would see, a low productivity and then a huge spike. I'm not going to get fooled by that. He had an 11.4% tackle rate versus the run. So again, like I said, not an outside linebacker, pure defensive end. Not bad, but he's definitely not helping you in run support. His bread and butter is rushing the passer there. He instinctively gets off blocks, uses a variety of moves and techniques to beat his blockers. And unlike Tyree Wilson, who kind of like thinks too much, at the gate. No, this guy is very instinctive. He just goes there, he gets it. He has the size. He's very fluid in his techniques. But again, one of the things, one of the scouts out there have said is that he has a problem converting speed to power. So again, he makes the moves well. He doesn't like stutter and think about like what moves he's going to make, but you're still lacking that overall aggressiveness as an edge rusher. But, one of the things, we're talking about IDP. One of the things is opportunity. If you have a clear opportunity to set snaps, a lot of these things from a fantasy manager point of view can be overlooked, right? As long as the person has some competency, rushing the passer, getting you some tackles, and has the line to snaps, he's very suitable. He has the frame. He's a big body. He could be coached up. There's some mock drafts out there that have him projected as a late first, early second round pick. Daniel Jeremiah recently had him as the pick of the Chiefs. Chiefs don't have Frank Clark anymore. Let him go, bring somebody else in to be the edge rusher there. Will McDonald fits in nicely. Again, he's not polished, but he can work on that. So I thought he was a very good option right there at strictly defensive end. But 11.4% tackle rate for a defensive end only, that was pretty impressive there. Hollywood, who do you got for us next? Oh, we lost him again. I think we lost him. All right. Well, Hollywood, for the sake of the show, we'll just come back to you next week. It's unfortunate, but we will get to you. And again, he had, for just those who are wondering, Derek Hall. Who's Derek Hall? Check out our Dynasty Prospect video coming up soon over on our YouTube channel, as well as on fantasyinframes.com. We'll promise we'll have Hollywood back to talk about him, either in a short video segment or some way. I feel horrible. But let's go to our next player here. Austin, who do you got for us?
I've got a back-to-back national champion with the Georgia Bulldogs, Nolan Smith. He ended up weighing in at 238 pounds, measured at 6'2".
Oh, Hollywood's back. There he is. Hey, Hollywood.
Nolan Smith is a bit on the smaller side for an edge rusher, but his athletic ability is just outrageous. Kind of like how I talked in the beginning. Some of these athletes you just kind of have to go with because you never know what's going to happen whenever they step on the field and actually get some coaching as well. Maybe he, gains some muscle, gets a little bit bigger size-wise, and we'll see. So he came in to the combine. He led all edge rushers in the 40-yard dash, the 10-yard split, and the vertical jump. The vertical jump itself was 3.5 inches higher than any other edge rusher, and that was at 41.5 inches. He is the second heaviest player to ever run a sub-4 440 and jump higher than 40 inches since 2006. Does either one of you know who the other player is?
Is this both an offense and or defense question, or
It's yes, offense or defense. Yes,
I would not even know where to begin. Who is it?
it is Vernon Davis.
What, fellow Terp? Go Terrapins!
There you go. Yeah, I threw that one in there for you.
Oh my God.
Playing up to the boss. I love it. See, Hollywood.
The only other event that he participated in was the broad jump, in which he finished third in. So just a freak athlete in all of those, combine events that he took place in. As for his pro day with Georgia, the scouts were very impressed by the linebacking drills that he went through. Sounded like he absolutely rocked it. He's been climbing up the ranks for the draft here coming up. Let's talk about his production numbers a little bit here. Nothing specifically stood out really in terms of production, but he did play in the SEC, on the national championships for back-to-back years. So let's see here. In 2021, he had 53 tackles, 8 for a loss, and 4.5 sacks. He had 28 total pressures to go along with that, so it's not a terrible thing to see. But that could be due to his undersize at the position. So maybe the athleticism isn't when it's going to translate into the NFL. We'll see. As for his 2022 stats, he only started 8 games. He only grabbed 18 total tackles in those, but seven of them were for a loss, and he got 3 sacks with 19 total pressures to go along with that. I know Georgia wasn't a big pass rushing team this past year. I think with his 3 sacks, he was like 3rd on the team, and he didn't even play in all of them.
It's crazy.
So, that who knows what's going to happen with him. Obviously, the biggest concern here is his torn pec. He tore that in early November, I believe. So he's about 4.5 months out on that. So, that's why he didn't participate in the bench press, didn't participate in some of these other strength testing this early because he's still a little bit early on that. But it looks like he's going to be totally fine for training camp. Should be full strength at that point. But the teams don't really seem to be caring about this torn pec at all either. The rumors are that he's rising. He's ranked the 15th best prospect on Mel Kiper's big board, and he's looking like he's going to climb into the top 15 or potentially even a top 10 NFL pick this year.
That's crazy. You would think with like injuries like that, like a torn pec, that would in previous seasons, like that would definitely get you disqualified from not disqualified, but not make you a top 15 player. But the fact that they're not worried about him and given his productivity on limited usage this past year. That's insane. No, that's pretty awesome. Let me go to my next player before we wrap up with Hollywood. BJ Ojulari, brother of Aziz Ojulari of the New York Giants. BJ attended LSU, 6'3", 250. Again, another right defensive end in college, according to Pro Football Focus. He had 5.5 sacks last year, had a 14.9% pressure rate. That's fantastic. Again, consistency going back to 2021. He had 7 sacks with a 14.5% pressure rate. He had an 18.9% win rate against offensive linemen, which had him as the edge defender 12. Again, defensive end, not expecting a huge tackle rate against the run, but he had a 10.2% tackle rate. So, much like Will McDonald, you don't really get the high upside tackle volume with a pure defensive end versus an outside linebacker, but still pretty good for what it is. He does everything you want an edge rusher to do. When I say that, I mean, like, he has his blinders on. When the ball is snapped, he goes after the quarterback, and it's fantastic. Technique, great. Power, great. Explosiveness, burst, great. Up until the point where he doesn't get the quarterback, and now he has to readjust, reset, and go try to make a play. That's where those blinders stay on a little bit too long, and he kind of like spends his time watching plays develop versus actually getting in on the plays to stop them from developing. You kind of hope that that's not an issue in terms of hustle or anything along that line of effort. I think he literally just, brain freezes, and it takes him a little bit too much time to reset there. There's a lot of talk that, at the various team meetings he's going to, or interviews he's going to post combine, that he could potentially be converted to an outside linebacker in the pros, which would be good. But again, he has to work on run support there. But again, one of these prospects who, has first round talent, I think he was probably going to be somebody who would go in the second round of NFL drafts, third round at the latest. For your IDP rookie drafts, though, again, defensive and specific positions for a rookie, I would say probably a second round pick, late second round pick, just because of the tackle rate, and then there's upside there for the fact that if he does convert to an outside linebacker, I think he could make that conversion pretty well. Got some comments here from Devi IDP Grind from your boys, Hollywood. Let's see what he has to say here. Got tell Hollywood to make his back to see. Don't know what that means. Are you in a draft right now, or are all these people hassling you because you're in an IDP draft right now, Hollywood? I think this next question.
Yeah. I can wait. I got time.
We have a question here for you, Hollywood. Does your brain freeze as often as your internet does?
Never. Absolutely never. Not even close.
Gotta love it.
So yeah, I deal with these assholes later. So
no, but I like BJ Ojulari from LSU. Very, very curious that both him and his brother could potentially be playing the same role in the NFL. That's pretty awesome right there. But I do love the consistency and pressure rate. I do love the win rate. And again, you would expect that tackle rate, in the pros to convert if he's able to get that opportunity switching from a defensive end to an outside linebacker. So those are my thoughts there. Hollywood, who do you want to talk about before we close out the show tonight?
Well, I was talking my internet cut out. Edge rusher for the Auburn Tigers, elite player for Gulfport High School, started 3 games for him for Auburn as a true freshman, right? Over his career, 47 games, 39 starts, so he's very experienced. 146 tackles, 99 solos, 29.5 for a loss, 19.5 sacks, and 5 forced fumbles with a pick. Finished his career career at Auburn, right? 12 plus sack seasons. So think about that. How many players have had back-to-back seasons in the SEC of 12 plus sacks? So his production level is kind of out the roof, right? Because that's the SEC is being measured as the elite. So if you can produce versus the elite, you should be able to produce in the NFL. That's the translation. Just being one of Auburn's all-time sack pass rushers is just insane. At the combine, kind of tested above average, right? 4.55, 1.59 split. Well, the 1.59 split was really good, but the 4.55, 40, and the 33.5-inch vertical, those are not elite numbers, but they're above average. So, as I told you earlier, I watch film, then go to the numbers. So, what I see on film is very different, right? It shows good burst, good speed, bend. To get to the quarterback, he's long. And NFL teams are going to fight over their player like that. That's got a long reach, long wingspan, that can just jump off the snap, get after the pass rusher. There's a huge role for that. He plays like a Mack truck when he's attacking the quarterback, right? Like a runaway train. He's coming downhill for everything he's got. And more often than not, he's successful and big impact player, right? He's not very good in coverage. Well, I don't want to say not very good best in coverage, right? But let's face it, that's not what he's going to be drafted to do because he's a pure pass rusher. So his run stopping efforts seem to be a little minus what his pass rushing is, so he could improve there. Very athletic, but his body control is just a little out of whack. He needs to get more under control. And I think he would be even better than what he is. So some NFL coaching will fix this, improve something.
Nice. Again, folks, we apologize for the audio technical difficulties. Of course, when we release this,
it's mine. I'm sorry.
No worries. When we put this out in podcast form, all this will be trimmed up, and you can look forward to that podcast in the next couple of days. But we just want to thank you for tuning in, staying with us throughout the show. We had a great time talking defensive linemen / edge rushers, rookie prospects heading into the NFL draft, and what they could mean for your dynasty fantasy football team, as well as potentially redraft if there's a clear path to snaps this coming year. But more likely for your dynasty fantasy football team. Don't forget to head over, again, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, check out all of our other content, hit that bell so you're notified whenever we put out more content. We put out YouTube shorts, we put out medium form content, we have our long podcast episodes. So whatever you want, we have it there. Don't forget to head over to fantasyandframes.com and look at all of our article for talking about dynasty targets and rookie prospects. Again, IDP players will be started to get introduced to there pretty soon, within the next week or so. Our dynasty rankings, our IDP rankings, check all that stuff out, as well as don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to the Fantasy in Frames podcast. There you'll be hearing all of our shows from Dynasty 365 to Fourth in Frames, and once we get in season, the Daily Fix show. So we're definitely excited for all the content we're producing for you all. Don't forget to tune in next Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern, where we're going to be talking about 2023 rookie linebackers. So thank you very much. Gator J behind the glass, thank you very much for all your help. You all have a great, safe weekend coming up, and we'll see you next week.